What's poppin' people, with your boy Zero, aka Black Natsuki Subaru, and today, I know y'all see that, I know y'all see it. I know y'all see it. Y'all read the title. You guys know the chapter. I had to take a break. I had to take a break. I have food. I have water. And I have a undisclosed bottle of a liquid that's full. We are about to watch a movie. I'm not going to deliberate any longer. This is, without a doubt, going to be one of the craziest chapter readings we have ever had, and maybe we'll ever get. This man has easily become one of the best characters in the entire series to me. Obviously, number one is Subaru. I'd say arguably number two is this man. So look, we're here today to read Arc 9, Chapter 52 and 53. I'm going to cry. I'm choked up. We're going to read Aldebaran. I'm bricked up. You're bricked up. I'm already getting emotional. I don't even know what's gonna happen. I don't even know what's going to happen. I'm just terrified. I'm terrified. Let's just jump into it. In real time, it would have been close to 20 years ago, but in terms of perceived time, it was a completely different order of magnitude. Even if he remembered the number of attempts he had needed for individual deadlocks, he had not memorized the total number of attempts he had taken across everything, not to mention the amount of time that had passed throughout all of what would have been so outrageous that he did not want to even think about it. Only it was an absolute truth that he was expending far more time than a single lifetime would usually allow. Wait, did I read all of this? I'm just gonna reread it, fuck it. Be that as it may, even after going through all that time, it would be incorrect to assume that Aldebaran had reached the same mental state as the elves who lived for hundreds of years in perennial youth. Okay, I did read this in the last one. If the human mind was something that started out as immature before eventually maturing enough to reach a state of aged wisdom, that was because the passage of time would allow one to experience both the sweet and the sour, granting the mind ample room to grow. But all the time Aldebaran spent outside the passage of actual time was, so to speak, a series of stagnant moments used to break through whatever difficulty was laid before his eyes. In practice, those would range from a few seconds to a few minutes at most. And just by repeating those small intervals countless times, a human could not hope to grow. Ergo, Aldebaran believed that the accumulation of time repeated by his authority was time spent in futility, something that only ever served to abrade his heart. and never to foster its growth. Even if it was time spent in such futility, when it got to the point of repeating several hundreds, tens of thousands, hundreds of millions of times, the brain would automatically begin filtering memories, attempting to rob Aldebaran of his genuine recollections. Nevertheless, there certainly existed memories that did not fade, recollections that, rather than his brain, seemed to be etched into his very soul, and the aforementioned words were undoubtedly among them. But then again, if in addition to already lacking memories of all the time he had lived, Aldebaran were to also say that he did not even wish to remember all of it, he could picture the witch, the very incarnation of a curiosity who eagerly wanted to know everything, quietly muttering to herself, "I see. What a shame." Although she boasted that she could not understand emotions, the witch was an expert at putting on an act to bend others to her will. And despite knowing that, Aldebaran could not defy the witch's words or attitude. That was the manner in which he had been disciplined, in which he had been reshaped. Were he to phrase it in such a way, it might have been a fair matchup against the inhumanity of the shinobi village that he had happened to hear bits and pieces about from Ye. Oh god. Of course his is way worse. Dude. Ye was like a kidnapped child soldier who was like a prodigy. This man was literally a construct made to be able to defeat the Witch of Envy. By dying countless times to be able to look, you know, I had to pour that first one already because like it's already going crazy. In this case, it was toss up between whether it was the shinobi village treated as equal to the witch, who were the crazed ones, or if it was actually the witch single-handedly contending against the entire history of the shinobi village, who was truly insane. Either way, the current Aldebaran was a product of the witch's creation. Even if you say that, you do have the right to live your own life. That alone is a domain that even a creator must not one-sidedly intrude upon. Hence, supposing you sincerely believe that you cannot follow me from the bottom of your heart, you may withdraw from the plan at any time. That is your freedom. On occasion, the witch would say such things as though to question Aldebaran's resolve. It was an unusual concern for a witch to bear. Fundamentally, once she had secured the other party's consent, the witch's usual strategy was to always maneuver in such a way that the promises she had coerced could not be taken back. In fact, among the lessons and assignments that the witch had levied upon Aldebaran, there had been plenty with contents nightmarish enough to have made him hesitate. He had not agreed to not giving up in advance. Whenever the witch made him do such things, she would never ask him if he wished to stop once she had gotten him to agree. And yet, when it came to the root of it all, his initial and most fundamental resolve, she would often press him about it. Aldebaran interpreted that as potentially being witch's own way of expressing her sense of guilt or inner turmoil. But was that really so? The witch proclaimed herself as unable to comprehend emotion. However, there was no way that she did not know the likes of rage, joy, and sorrow. If she was capable of expressing those sorts of human emotions, then would it not also be possible for her to harbor a sense of guilt or apprehension towards the future? At the very least, throughout the time Aldebaran had spent with the witch, Even if there were times when he had thought her a witch incapable of comprehending the human heart, he had never once thought her a witch bereft of a human heart. In the interval between not having and not understanding, there lay a completely different landscape. Could it be that this simply manifested in the form of the witch's questions? If that were the case, then for each time she had voiced that question, had the witch perhaps felt lost? Lamenting the harsh path that she would eventually have Aldebaran walk, and desiring to respect Aldebaran's own will, letting him choose his own life. Had such a turmoil existed within her? Maybe. Just maybe. On the 1 in a million chance, on the 1 in a billion chance, the witch did have such feelings. Ironically enough, that became the exact reason why Aldebaran would not go back to his resolve. Therefore, I see. Hearing the same answer Aldebaran always gave, the witch's reaction had also been the same as ever. Perhaps he was being played. Perhaps from the very moment Aldebaran had been created until that day, the witch had been pouring ample amounts of time into brainwashing him. Perhaps the witch harbored none of the feelings of guilt or hesitation that Aldebaran had anticipated. Perhaps she truly was such a wicked witch. But even if he were to pose that question directly to her, the witch, putting on that beautiful smile of white and black, "Naturally, I am a wicked magician after all." In such a manner, voicing answers that gave no clues as to their sincerity or deception, she toyed with Aldebaran. Basking in the roaring winds, Aldebaran glided through the air at furious speeds. I just know we're about to get lit up. I know we're about to get lit up. Calm before the storm. Calm before the fucking storm. You know what? Every drink that I do, I'm doing it on camera. I know this is going to be like a wild ride. The first drink of water in my koi cup. Fuck. I already know this shit's about to go crazy. He thought the sight of him spreading wings of stone on his back, catching the wind as he soared, would have looked terribly ridiculous, but he had no need to concern himself with appearances. As Jay held back their opponents, he would need to gain as much distance as possible, as well as eliminate the difference in elevation. Though I can't imagine that they were targeting my territory. Even as those words spilled from Aldebaran, he concentrated the majority of his attention on the formulation and operation of the stone wings on his back. The construction of the stone wings demanded an extremely delicate balance, with the size and hardness also requiring very fine adjustments. If they were too big, they would be tossed around by too much by the wind. But if they were too small, the objective could not even be realized in the first place. Hardness and density were also tied to weight. So, tuning them too much or too little would inevitably lead to a crash. Gotta hand it to Icarus for getting it right on this first try. That's cool. That's a cool reference. Speaking of taking to the skies with man-made wings, the one who came to mind was Icarus, the great predecessor who had fashioned wings of wax. Setting aside the fate he met, the fact that his wings had not only been able to glide, but had been able to flap and carry him up close to the sun quite honestly filled Aldebaran with wonder. Just how many times had Aldebaran crashed on account of poorly constructed wings? Oh damn, that's a bar. That would have been exactly what the opponent wanted. So after tackling the problem again countless times, he had finally managed to fashion his correct wings of stone. Even that was something like sharp in my fingers. What the hell? He had finally managed to fashion his current wings of stone. Even that was an intense feat that could not have been realized without utmost concentration and scrupulous caution, but I couldn't afford to continue falling like that. That reality and his impatience, they were the greatest reasons behind Aldebaran's ability to level up his level 1 stone wings with great haste, getting them to a level capable of flight for the first time being. Although Aldebaran had confidence in himself as the user of an invincible authority, it was not as though his territory had no shortcomings whatsoever. The enemy's ambush on this occasion was something that had inadvertently struck two of those weaknesses simultaneously. Strictly speaking, it could perhaps be better described as an attack on the same weak point from two different angles. For Aldebaran's authority, territory, there existed a valid range of effectiveness. The teleport brought about as a result of the ambush had thrown Aldebaran outside of the established area of his territory. On top of that, factoring in the destination of the teleport was a free fall from an extremely high elevation. It served as an attack against Aldebaran that would cause the destruction of the second territory. As a result, amidst his descent at furious speeds, Aldebaran had made sure to commit suicide before he fell outside the bounds of his territory, restarting from the middle of the fall many times over. Amidst those repetitions, he deemed that it would be impossible to break out of his high altitude sensation as he fell with his freedom of movement so severingly restricted. After testing a variety of different plans, he arrived at attempting to escape on stone wings. At the very least, this slowed his descending change in elevation, allowing him to maintain his territory with relative ease. And just as Aldebaran had finished untying that troublesome knot, ow! Indeed, sharply calling out to Aldebaran as he exerted all his efforts to maintain balance was the voice of a silver bell. Turning his head to glance back from a considerable lower altitude than Aldebaran, he could clearly see the figure of an angel, no, of Amelia, flying in the same direction as he, bearing wings forged of ice upon her slender back. She was rapidly closing the distance. Despite using the same method as Aldebaran, hers established an overwhelming lead in terms of its striking visual appeal. Unbelievable. He hoped it would be clear that there was no helping the dumbfounded, nearly admiring groan that had escaped him. The amount of hardship Aldebaran had endured to complete these stone wings, unshakely as they were, had already been described. Precisely because he had gone through all that effort, he felt respect toward Icarus and his wax wings. But just like the Icarus myth, Amelia since had succeeded in crafting artificial wings on her first try, achieving the same result as Aldebaran despite his innumerable failures. Rather than feeling respect towards that, he merely felt that definitive gap between them, furthering his sense of defeat. Even if the idea that I'm just being a bumbling idiot who crashed over 600 times is slightly better than the idea that Little Miss is a genius. It's not any Solstice, whatever. Sorry. I misread the fuck out of that. I'm so sorry. Man. I'm just trying to take this all in. So I'm trying to see how they're gonna do his name chapter, because they gave bits of how he perceived his early backstory and his teacher, Echidna, and then it put him back into the fight. I wonder if it's going to go back and forth between that. The strength of Aldebaran's territory lay within its war of endurance, allowing him to persist over the course of an unlimited number of attempts until even the slightest chance of victory arrived. His greatest advantage was his ability to continue playing the cards in his hand until his opponent blundered, giving rise to a situation in which Aldebaran could gain the upper hand. However, while this also applied to his battle against Reinhardt, there existed rare individuals in this world capable of constantly arriving at the correct answers. Those right answers would vary from person to person based on their individual abilities and their objectives for victory. But what they had in common was that unlike Aldebaran, they were all loved by fate. Ooh, Zero. Aldebaran was hated by fate itself. It was no longer clear whether Aldebaran had come to despise fate first, or if fate had been the one to initially hate Aldebaran, but that alone was an unshakable truth. Regardless of whether he was loved or abhorred by other things, fate was Aldebaran's absolute enemy. Therefore, he had no choice but to slay it. Even if it meant making an enemy of the world, he would slay fate no matter what. But since it did not wish to be killed, fate had been sending its own favorite pawns after him one after another in the form of assassins, here and now. It had selected Amelia and Rem to act as its implements. Just my luck. Just who had it been to suggest that Rem should be chosen as the first surprise attacker? Regardless of who had proposed it, she was by far the most suitable candidate in terms of creating a momentary void within Aldebaran's mind. When she had been a victim of the authority of gluttony, Aldebaran had failed to notice the abnormality of her existence as a result of that influence, unwittingly forming a proper relationship with her. Hence, after the death of Priscilla, the moment he had been hit by that flash grenade of memories and discovered that Rem had been released from the yoke of gluttony, his mind had been consumed by a much greater void than the others. After all, he had come across a being who should not have been present here, one who by all means should have been dead. As for how that outcome had been achieved, there was no room for debate. Doubtlessly, he had pulled it off. In his struggle against fate, Natsuki Subaru had managed to conquer it. The power to do so dwelt within Natsuki Subaru. Rem's very existence was proof of that. But regardless, despite all that, he did not save Priscilla Barrio. If that's how you're gonna play it, I'm not showing any mercy either. The tears he had shed, the fists he had punished him, the consideration he had attempted to offer, meaningless, all of it. After all, that which Aldebaran desired was neither tears, nor wounds, nor consolation. It was simply the life of a single person. Within his helmet, clenching his teeth to the point that they could taste blood, Aldebaran looked to his rear, as he simultaneously modified the angle of thickness of his wings, and all the while keeping the drop in speed and maneuverability to a minimum. In mid-air, he crossed gazes with Amelia amidst her pursuit of him. The beautiful wings of ice truly suited Amelia, but no matter how cute of an angel she was, she could not flap those artificial wings to gain speed or elevation. She had gained her initial velocity from the recoil from Rem's bashing the ice discus, but after that, there would have been no other method for her to gain on him. Yeah, ta, tat. Similar to whether she would launch an attack, Amelia raised those lackluster battle cries, and with each shout, her altitude and speed would increase by a step, and then by another step higher. The methodology was plain and clear. Using her magic to create a sickle or an icicle as a foothold in the air, she kicked off of it in order to gain acceleration and vigor. Yeah, obviously. After a moment of stillness, the created icicle was kicked down towards the ground by the strength of Amelia's legs. However, it immediately dispersed into mana and returned to the atmosphere before being born anew as yet another foothold. Once again, she kicked off from it to boost her momentum. By repeating this process, she had been able to relentlessly close the distance on Aldebaran. That's fucking ridiculous! Having an extraordinary sense for magic, it was a brute force solution made possible by her ability to get the most out of her vast supply of mana. Thanks to the path which linked him to Aldebaran, Aldebaran could draw from the power of the external mana tank known as the Divine Dragon. But even if he was asked to perform the same feat as Amelia, he simply would not be able to do it. Whew. All right. I think like every 3 scrolls I'll do like a drink. Damn it. This is actually the entertainment value is just so high right now. It's so high. I'm gonna take a little sip of my Dasani. That, oh man. Dude, I know we're still early. We've only been going for 30 minutes. Woo! Man. This, I know this chapter is going like, I know it's gonna go fucking crazy. Like, my doubts are not, oh, come on now. It's Aldebaran. All right. Let me see. Wait. Okay. It was not a question of mana capacity. There was just far too great of a gulf in their sensibilities and physical abilities. Even if he could bridge the gap in sensibilities through the limitless number of attempts, the gap in their physical abilities could not be spanned. The canyon stretched on for a great long distance, and the cliff faces which flanked both sides of the two aviators stretched just as far. So long as they both continued in the same direction, Amelia's pursuit would never cease. As Aldebaran grasped that reality, Amelia kicked off a newly created icicle, and while there still existed some distance between them, her elevation finally matched his. Then, while keeping the balance of her ice wings, "Ow! I'm begging you! Let's talk this out! I'll properly listen to what you have to say!" Oh. If Amelia is what breaks Al down, that's going to be so fucking iconic. "That's rich coming from you. Weren't you all? Ask questions later. Coming at me and trying to freeze me with no mercy? If I continue to fall all the way to the bottom like that, you were planning on freezing me along with the entire river, weren't you? But that plan already failed." You should be careful about being too upfront, royal candidate. The root of looking on passively and descending to the bottom was a surefire pattern of completely falling right into the, well, because like, I mean, to be fair, if they know that like Al's ability is to turn back time, they're not worried about killing him, because they know that like if they could potentially kill him, he could potentially get out of it. Like that's just being like just obvious. Like these people are not like imbeciles. In order to escape that, he had gone all or nothing on choosing a path that veered away from the ice disk's falling trajectory. Even he had failed to lose both of them at once. Should he perhaps count the fact that he had managed to split up Amelia and Rem as a win? The answer to that: it's time to find out. My attitude from the royal capital still hasn't changed. Deciding to take measures to shake free from Amelia's pursuit, Aldebaran raised his hand aloft and created stones mid-air, assailing her with a barrage of such projectiles. Unexpectedly, the scene unfolded as if something right out of a shooting game had been brought into real life, and greeted by that barrage of stones, Amelia with a flash for wings. I'll say it as many times as it takes. I don't want to cry believing that there was nothing I could have done. Damn it. I'll say it as many times as it takes. I don't want to cry believing that there was nothing that could have been done about someone's passing anymore. Proclaiming so in a loud voice, Amelia plunged into the barrage, and the shrieks of the shattering and the freezing atmosphere resounded across the Agzat cannon as a shrill melody. The reason for his existence as the following star was not something that Aldebaran had ever worried about too much. After all, it seemed that at least once during adolescence, just about everyone would wonder why they had been born, wonder where life came from and where it faded off to, and experience something like a rebellious spirit against their parents for no reason. But for Aldebaran, those were all notions that felt quite alien to him. In Aldebaran's case, it was a bit difficult to establish exactly who the parent he ought to rebel against would be. And due to the nature of his authority, he never truly got a sense of his life fading off whenever it was lost. When it came to the purpose of his birth, he had been provided with a precise answer. And as for why he had been born, he supposed that perhaps the answer was love. And so, Aldebaran had never grappled with the notions that ought to have been entertained during one's adolescence. Neither did he consider that as some failure on his part, nor as something that he had missed out on. In society, it seemed like there was the idea that people should challenge themselves with hardship while young, but experiences that would just end up becoming an embarrassing dark past upon entering adulthood held no actual value. It was fine to miss out on experiences that were not worth going through, just as how it was fine for death to be something that everyone only experienced once at the very end of their life. I see. So you have no desire for any of the emotions or impulses typical of adolescence. That is a bit of a shame. I had even been considering various ways in which I might deal with your rebellious phase, depending on how it might have manifested. That was the lamentation of the witch. And though he did not consider her to be lacking a heart, she often made such heartless comments towards Aldebaran, who had seen a quick upbringing without causing much trouble. For Aldebaran, the witch was the person with whom he had spent the most time with since his birth, but she had a bad habit of wanting to bear witness to every single choice and emotion of humans, every last possibility. Furthermore, in his majority of cases, the inability to hold back such desires was the nature of a witch. Aldebaran had been acquainted with witches other than her, yet, while it was to varying degrees, the fact that not a single one of them could defy that nature struck him as horribly blasphemous. Hence, the witch's attitude, awaiting Aldebaran's adolescence with an air of dissatisfaction, was something brought about by a nature that could not be defied. And when he thought about it like that, he could see that there was no helping it. Nevertheless, he saw no point in pretending to go through adolescence just to make the witch happy. In a sense, it almost felt like the very rebellious spirit indicative of adolescent emotions. Adolescent emotions. Yerp. Yep. I'm just gonna do one of those. This series is crazy. I hope, wait, hold on. I hope none of the music is like copywritten. It might be. Video game bangers, there we go. Whatever. Wait, that, what? Oh. As expected, maybe it is too convenient for me. Someone who's not even a parent. Oh, that's toxic. To attempt superficial initiating such parental experiences. If that one created Beatrice, were they perhaps able to experience it? If that one created Beatrice, were they perhaps able to experience it? This gives a lot more weight to the notion that the Witch of Greed in the Tea Party is a different Witch of Greed than that lived. Is her soul that exists in the Tea Party a manifestation of the true embodiment of the witch factor of greed that makes her almost a separate entity? Is that what that means? Is the Witch of Greed from the Tea Party, from the trials, a different existence based on the corruption of the soul of the witch factor of greed that's separate and somewhat different than the way that the witch factor affected the actual Witch of Greed that lived? Because there's no way that you can't make this connection. They're the same person. Like, we already know it's the Witch of Greed. Like, I've read the fucking, like, I've read like the fucking prologue, like, for like 40 and like whatever, but like, how does time flow in the Tea Party? Is it a constant stream that isn't, wait, what? What? Yo. Okay, we're gonna keep going. What the fuck? Yo. Dude, no, that raises some really interesting questions then. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I gotta do this other one. Whatever number this is, whatever. But like, at least I'm not like red number 8. that is diabolical. What? That confirms it. They're not the same people. As the witch began to propose such questions to herself, Aldebaran was certain that his sense of loneliness he felt was completely unrelated to adolescence, and instead was something else entirely. Only it was difficult to seek a concrete answer as to why he felt that way, and their relationship was a bit too complex for him to ask. And so, just how the witch had established that relationship between Aldebaran and herself was, "Teacher." And when he called out to her, the witch, in the midst of enjoying a stroll through the labyrinth of her own thoughts, lifted her face. Whenever Aldebaran found himself reflected in those black irises, seeing her hair of pure white cascading down her shoulders as she tilted her head in a, "What is it?" he could not help but think about what an unfair witch she was. Even though she was always immersed in her own affairs, staying true to her desires without ever so much as trying to show consideration to the hearts of others, whenever Aldebaran called out to her, she would meet his eyes without fail. The fact that he had never felt any sort of adolescent rebellion spirit against the witch was but a matter of course. To begin with, the incentive to do so was shallow, and both his body and mind had long yielded to the futility of defying the witch. Purporting it as performance testing to him, purporting it as performance testing to him. Purporting it as performance testing to help him master the use of his authority, the witch had subjected Aldebaran to death over 1,000,000 times. Jesus fucking shit! Oh my god! And had already concluded her assessment of him. But then again, no matter how much he brought that up, the witch in question gave no meaningful reply, only responding, "I don't recall even a single one of those times. So even if you tell me to feel some responsibility, I'm at a bit of a loss." No, you know what makes sense though? When she was testing him to overcome being able to die by every fucking obstacle, it's not like he's resetting time within the domain of her being like, "Oh yeah, it's not like she is able to re-experience or go back like a second or two before he dies. When she like does like Algoa and he's like eviscerated, he comes back like, and like she waits for it to be done, and then based on what they like talked about, like when he's done like fucking freaking out, he'll be like, one immediate Algoa, goes again another time, but to her, when he comes back less and less distraught, just saying like 4, 5, 6, but like it's the first time to her, but it could be like the 1,000th time to Al. He can be like 1,000, and then she's like, and that's the first, like to her like before she even enacts it, when he starts his domain, his territory, he's like 1,000, like he steps into place before she can even like activate the magic. He's like 9,000, Like, and then it's like 9,999, and then for the first time to her, like, it seems to be, even though like she can read his memories, she can see like that he's going through it, but like genuinely for her, he's like, the first time that they do it without her reading his memories, he's literally like 10,000, and she does it again, and it's like, oh wait, you said like only 10,000, and he was like, she's like, yeah, my bad, just making sure. Dude, Return by Death may be one of the craziest abilities in fiction in the context of how it's done in ReZero. Damn it. Damn it. Sorry, I'm pouring another one now, but I'm not gonna do it yet. Dude, that yap, man. I was really thinking about some stuff that it just really goes to show like what, like, how does the witch perceive him? And like, would, like, because she's questioning if she would, like she just doesn't know how it feels to be a parent, even if she made Al, right? Since if she actually made Al and made him to to complete a certain mission, which is very in line for like OG Echidna, for her to reference the original Witch of Greed, it's so interesting. God damn it. Ooh, this story is so good. This story is so fucking good. Fuck. I'm mid chapter reading, fucking rambling about how, like, the implications of what I've just fucking read. And this is how people need to consume this. Take the time, think about it. I know this isn't live. Let me know, chat. If y'all want me to do like a live reading of any of these chapters, let me know. Comment it on whatever video that you watch. Like, if you watch this one, I think this is probably like the first or second one that I made it like clear, like I can do this live if y'all want, just so I can interact with y'all motherfuckers while I'm reading this shit. Dude, it's different. Oh my god, where are we? Where the fuck are we at? To begin with, the incentive to do so was shallow, and both his body and mind had long yielded to the futility of defying the witch. Oh yeah. Purporting it as performance testing to help him master the use of his authority, the witch had subjected Aldebaran to death over 1,000,000 times and had already concluded her assessment of him. But then again, no matter how much he brought that up, the witch in question gave no meaningful reply, only responding, "I don't recall even a single one of those times. Even if you tell me to feel some responsibility, I am not at a bit of a loss." Fucking dickhead. Regardless, he could understand why the witch would go to such lengths. After all, at present, the only witch who still remained alive, not counting the ones before his eyes, was the individual who either directly or indirectly caused the death of all the other witches. The point of contact Aldebaran had shared with with those witches was not something that had taken place during their time amongst the living. He cannot meet with them anywhere outside of the infinite space that had been prepared by the witch. Okay. By the time he had gotten the chance to meet them here, they were already long dead. Long dead. Their existences not but gathered souls. Thus, as for the one who had done that to them, under the witch's instruction, Aldebaran would need to, "You must kill her no matter what." That was the reason for existence that Aldebaran, the following star, had been granted before even experiencing adolescence. The benchmark of his life that he would need to fulfill even if it meant dying 1,000,000 times. In order to make Aldebaran this way, the witch had been reproached by the other witches, having severed ties even with her companions. So her resolve would have needed to be absolute. In order to make Aldebaran this way, the witch had been reproached by the other witches, having severed ties even with her companions. So her resolve would have needed to be absolute. Don't try and paint this fucking bitch as the one who's actually trying to save ReZero. Like, she's not the one. Like, dude, no, she is. No, bro. Dude, what the dude, my fucking brain is trembling. Dude, like before I even finish the chapter, I don't know like how much longer it is, but like saying something like that, in order to make Aldebaran this way, the witch had been reproached by the other witches, meaning they were trying to stop her from doing certain shit. Having severed ties even with her companions, I can see that as fucking Beetlejuice, as well as other people that we don't know at this point. Her resolve would have needed to be absolute. She was like, there is no, bro. Is Echidna the actual fucking savior of the verse because she tried to make a fake Subaru to stop what was going to happen in the future, like the inevitable end of the world, and the only one who can actually stop it, the only thing that Satella wanted was for her to be killed by her lover, like Subaru, and she's like, hey, I'm gonna make an artificial one to make you impossible like to kill Loki, and like because her authority allowed her to see like the past, present, and future. That Loki changed how I look at her, even if it's not like accurate to her goals. I'm just like, that's a possibility. And for her, she thrives off of getting like every possible outcome of every world that exists through those who can experience it. I can see how her soul could be overtainted by like the obsession with greed, but the obsession with wanting to fix what was wrong, and like her wanting to cry because of Amelia, her saying like, you're just like your mom. Who is that? Like, what? Oh my god, what the hell? Dude, we're getting a lot more. Comment like how you guys like feel about like my deliberation. Anyway, I forgot where I am. To begin with, the incentive to do so was shallow. Oh, okay. And both his body and mind had long yielded to the futility of defying the witch. I already fucking read that. God damn it. I'm sorry. After all, at present, the only witch who still remained alive, not counting the one before his eyes, was the individual who either directly or indirectly caused the deaths of the other witches. Wait, at present, okay, the only one that, okay. The point of contact Aldebaran had shared with those witches was not something that had taken place during their time amongst the living. He could not meet with them anywhere outside of the finite space that had been prepared by the witch. By the time he had gotten the chance to meet with them, they were already long dead, their existence not but gathered souls. Thus, as for the one who had been that had done them, who had done that to them, under the witch's instructions, Aldebaran would need to. You must kill her no matter what. That's where I left off. Okay. I'm gonna skip like that line. In order to make Aldebaran this way, the witch had been reproached by the other witches, having severed ties even with her companions. So a resolve would have needed to be absolute. Okay, like I did read all of this. My bad. Like I like literally went on a tangent and like just forgot where I was, forgot that I read it. Anyway, there is nobody who can defeat you. You whom I created. She can say whom I created, but not mean that she actually made him from scratch. That could be another person that, as far as like what he is now, is what she created, even though he existed prior. Her act of speaking those words to him was something Aldebaran took pride in, and it served as the very foundation of his being. In all honesty, he thought the witch had a horrible personality, and he had many reservations about her teaching methods and her way of giving instructions, but even so, he had no doubt that he would be able to live up to the witch's expectations. He had believed that he would be able to do it. Back in those days, the Aldebaran still had his left arm. He had still been able to believe so. After all, even if he knew death, he had not known true defeat. He had never experienced adolescence, but unmistakably, that was foolish. That was the foolish dark past of his that could never be erased. As Amelia plunged headfirst into the incessant barrage of stones, Aldebaran stifled all the hesitation within his heart, mustering up his full, unrestrained firepower. As was also the case for the clash in the royal capital, Aldebaran had an instinctive weakness when it came to Amelia. And I am quite curious as to why. At this point, it was clear that this was an example of a weakness inherent to all life, and due to that, he had been unable to bring himself to take the sort of drastic measure he might have otherwise taken had it been a different opponent, even in the royal capital. Back then, he had borrowed the strength of Aldebaran to hurl down a colossal boulder, preventing Amelia's pursuit of him by occupying her with the protection of the royal capital. But here, there was nobody else he could drag into the fray. In that sense, the decision to drop him in the middle of the massive canyon showed that she had clearly reflected on their previous encounter. Though you're not exactly giving me enough leeway to appreciate your growth right now. Unfortunately, Aldebaran's heart was not currently relaxed enough to rejoice in the growth of himself or his enemies. For a moment, he felt reluctant to define Amelia as an enemy, but he forcefully shut his eyes to that. The resolve was something he had settled a long time ago, long before he even met Priscilla. Even if, strictly speaking, the target of Aldebaran's resolve was not the Amelia before his eyes. Even if it's recycled resolve, it'd still be about as useful as paper mache. Holding aloft that resolve despite fully knowing it was but paper mache, he moved to sever Amelia's pursuit, diving straight into the storm of rocks Sorry for the pause. I break. Whew. My eyes have been glued. My eyes have been fucking glued. And it's affecting them. I'm like, dude, my eyes have been glued. Next, drink it. Trying to remember where I am. Unfortunately, Aldebaran's heart was not currently relaxed enough to rejoice in the growth of himself or his enemies. For a moment, he felt reluctant to define Amelia as an enemy, but he forcefully shut his eyes to that. That resolve was something he had settled a long time ago, long before he had even met Priscilla. It's a clone of Subaru, it has to be. Even if, strictly speaking, that target of Aldebaran's resolve was not the Amelia before his eyes. Even if it's recycled resolve, it'll still be about as useful as paper mache. Holding aloft that resolve despite fully knowing it was but paper mache, he moved to sever Amelia's pursuit, diving straight into the storm of rocks the size of fists. Amelia's ice wings boldly shimmered. The attack had been intended to delay their movements, even if only slightly, by forcing her to evade or to take a defensive stance. But that is his unpleasant hunch had suspected. Amelia adopted the straightforward approach by taking the shortest path. Icy wings, adorned back, icicles for footholds, and now firing stakes of ice to counter the barrage fending off any that made it through that interception by parrying with the twin swords of ice in her grasp. Sorry. The witch had taught him that the simultaneous activation of magic was difficult, even for a proficient magician. Even if it was magic, the same attribute, the talent it required was akin to an unreasonable task, such as taking a pen in each hand and trying to write an essay with the right hand while attempting to draw an illustration with the left. Well, I mean, like, there are people like on this planet, and I probably consider us like one of like the lower tiers, only because with how massive like the universe is, if there is, and I feel like there are like other like worlds, we can't be nowhere close to like the most crazy shit, but we can all have our attributes. Anyway, honestly, it was to the point that he had seriously questioned whether the witch's smaller than average head could truly house 5 small brains. Even setting aside that extraordinary digression, and even if they were all under the same attribute of fire, with the wings, icicles, ice stakes, and twin swords, the simultaneous activation of 4 varieties of magic was a sufficient feat in its own right. And adding on to that, in order to implement her absurd manner of chase, she had to put a display of athleticism greater than that of an Olympic athlete. Okay, this is from like perspective of Al, giving him the feeling that he had already exhausted his daily quota of surprise points. That's why I gotta meet her with minimal discomposure. I don't think that's been working. Didn't work for yay. Amelia had opted to overcome the storm of rocks and stones solely through courage and brute strength. But setting that courage aside, what would she do if faced with a threat that could not be surmounted by physical might? Hold on, pause. Oh, did I like scroll too far down? Hold on, chat. Hold on. I'm just gonna start from right here because like I forgot where I was. I took like a whole like piss break, came back and like didn't know if I damn it. Didn't know if like I accidentally like scrolled further. Anyway. Even setting aside that extraordinary digression, and even if they were all under the same attribute of fire, with the wings, icicles, ice stakes, and twin swords, the simultaneous activation of 4 varieties of magic was a sufficient feat in its own right. And adding on to that, in order to implement her absurd manner of chaos, she had to put a display of athleticism greater than that of an Olympic athlete, giving him the feeling that he had already exhausted his daily quota of surprise points. That's why I gotta meet her with minimal discomposure. Amelia had opted to overcome the storm of rocks and stones solely through courage and brute strength. But setting that courage aside, what would she do if faced with a threat that could not be surmounted by physical might? Amelia was determined to close the distance, but in the face of the next threat, her cheeks tensed, unfolding before her all at once, providing her no path of escape, were objects even thinner than the stone projectiles and encirclements of gravel whose potential damage could be easily overlooked, similar to leaping into a torrential rain, so long as she did not possess the absurd ability to dodge the rain while midair. Reinhardt, it would be impossible for there to be 0 hits. Of course, it was not as though the only objective of that deployed sand was to obstruct her vision. Rather, it's heavy. Upon attempting to wipe off the sand that clung to her, Amelia raised her voice of astonishment as she flailed her arms about. The grains of sand that had made contact with her arms, legs, and white clothes began to consolidate with the surrounding grains of sand, obstructing her movements through their peck of hardness. It was a debuff. Well, it was a debuff attack he had also launched against Reinhardt at the Sand Sea. Reinhardt had torn free from it by breaking the sound barrier, but not even Amelia would be able to replicate that method. Moreover, my wings! The gravel's primary aim had been to hinder her wings of ice that sustained Amelia's flight. Having plunged into the sandstorm, the grit that had eroded her frozen wings, stripped them of their intrinsic ability to catch the wind. Then, Amelia's balance crumbled, and she immediately started to plummet headlong towards the ground. To prevent that from happening, Amelia promptly discarded her impaired wings, and by returning from being an angel to simply being an angel-like girl, she evaded the hardship. Purged! But that was precisely what Aldebaran had aimed to accomplish. Even though she cast away her ice wings, it was possible for Amelia to deploy another pair of wings right away, allowing her to restart without losing any of her previous momentum or altitude. However, when it came to her physical abilities, no matter how unorthodox they may be, they would not allow her to catch up to an impromptu hang glider exceeding 100 kilometers per hour. Henceforth, in order to prevent Amelia from deploying another pair of wings, Aldebaran doubled down. Jutting down off the cliff face, accompanied by a rumbling roar, a colossal arm of stone attempted to snatch Amelia out of the canyon sky. If that could hamper her momentum, then even if Amelia succeeded in forming another set of wings, she would lose the ability to catch up to Aldebaran's unceasing speed. Not to mention, the colossal arms obstructing Amelia did not end at just 1 or 2. Utilizing the raw materials of the cliff faces, the rocky arms protruding out totaled a count of several hundreds. Respect to thousand-armed cannon, or rather, it feels more like the backstage of a haunted house. I fucked that up. Respect to thousand-armed cannon, or rather, it feels more like the backstage of a haunted house. As a staple of haunted houses, a bunch of hands would suddenly pop out all at once from behind sliding paper doors. It had a similar impression to that. However, unlike the empty thread of those frights pose, the colossal arms were serious in their attempts to seize Amelia. If even one could just grab her by the leg, this chase subsequent would be completely finished. And this do or die situation would conclude with Aldebaran's successful escape. Think you can... Amelia. I'll do my best! Get past this. As she had attempted to finish those words, they were drowned out by her high spirits. He had not intended for it to be something that she could do anything about, simply by doing her best. But Amelia's ability to do her best and somehow wind up pushing through was one of the most fearsome aspects about her. Having lost her wings, Amelia put that fearsomeness on full display. Swinging a glacial sword in her grasp, she hewed the fingers off of the... Whoa. She hewed the fingers off of the grasp, off of the first giant arm to approach her. And having neutralized it, she used it as a platform to perform her next leap. Her momentum had yet to perish. Her elevation, too, was recovering significantly. However, even if the Behemoth arms did not quite reach the count of 1,000, there still numbered over 100 awaiting her. Soldiers, lend me your strength! Following Amelia's call, the ice soldiers with their repugnant appearance made their entrance once more. The soldiers of ice, who ought to have been shattered to naught during the fall of the ice discus, admirably stood up against the great earthen arms swarming Amelia. Some used their entire bodies to stop them, some delivered punches to knock them off course, and some were crushed while opposed after being overpowered. They performed a diverse array of contributions. What irritated Aldebaran above all else was the individual who had taken Amelia by the hand, guiding her away from the evil clutches of the colossal arms and flinging her forward to aid her in her advance. The Natsuki Subaru of Ice, 7 in total, would shatter... 7 in total. Would shatter whenever their duty was fulfilled. Until... Oh my god, dude, that's some writing. Fuck, I'm sorry. Fuck. The Nazi Subaru of Ice, 7 in total, would shatter whenever their duty was fulfilled, only to be born anew to serve Amelia. Repeating a cycle of destruction and rebirth, they never exceeded a maximum of 7 at once. And protecting Amelia from the hundreds of evil stone hands closing in, they continued to assist her. Magic was something that gave form to feeling and desires. The witch had said as much. He had thought that it had been a surprisingly romantic sentiment for the witch to have said, but considering how wind could take the form of a blade if one wished to slice up their opponent, and how flames akin to crimson lotus could be birthed to scorch everything in range, there was likely no room for debate. That was but a manifestation of feeling and desire. In that case, at this moment, the sight of Natsuki Subaru-shaped ice soldiers aiding Amelia before Aldebaran's eyes, just what sort of desire could it possibly be a manifestation of? It made his stomach churn. That was not the... Hold on, chat. In that case, at this moment, the sight of Natsuki Subaru-shaped ice soldiers aiding Amelia before Aldebaran's eyes, just what sort of desire could it possibly be the manifestation of? It made his stomach churn. That was not in the figurative sense, but rather with the... So like, there's like some work being done outside, like, and I'm just like, I don't know if it's being caught into like the mic. It's annoying. Anyway, thanks for doing your work, but damn it, it's fucking, it's like fucking almost 6 o'clock, 6 p.m. God damn it. Okay, forgot where I was. Just what sort of desire could it be possibly the manifestation of? It made his stomach churn. That was not the figurative sense, but rather with the unmistakable true meaning. As those negative emotions boiled within him, Aldebaran linked together the next attack. That was... Sorry for rehashing the same punchline, but it's the return of my trump card. Upon speaking those words, in the air above Aldebaran, Amelia and the ice soldiers, filling the breath of the Agzad Canyon to its fullest, an enormous mighty boulder began to hurtle straight down. An inescapable crushing force by the tremendous mass. It was the second coming of the trap he had set back in the royal capital. It had been desired, nay, what had been required was but a singular victory in his life. Damn it. It would be no exaggeration to say Aldebaran's life existed solely for the sake of that victory. Since the very moment of his creation, every gift bestowed upon Aldebaran, every lesson poured into his vessel, every blessing graced upon him, all had been ordained for the sake of guiding him towards that victory, to ensure that he would rise, claim it for his own, and stand exalted in triumph. The weight and significance of it all were things Aldebaran had fully understood, or so he had thought. I saw my shot. God damn it. However, when the hour came for his conviction to be sorry, words, hold on. Pause. This may not be the best music for this this continuation, but we're gonna keep going. I'm sorry, a lot has happened. Anyway, I'm just gonna start from the top. The weight and significance of it all were things Aldebaran had fully understood, or so he had thought. However, when the hour came for his conviction to be tested, that tempered resolve, those carefully wrought plans, his very soul, refined to perfection, as it ought to have been. All of it was rendered meaningless. There is nobody who can defeat you, you whom I created. Wait. Question. Do you think that the reason why Echidna made Al was because she saw the future in which Subaru would come and not take the contract and was like, damn, this is literally the best thing that I can fucking make or get. So let's recreate that same person, but arguably more broken, and he still can't fucking win. Ooh, shit. Oh my god, that's so crazy. Okay, if that's like an actual thing. Okay, those words bestowed upon him by the witch had been the benchmark of Aldebaran's life. So long as he heeded those words, no obstacle placed before him could ever hope to halt his advance. And so, the thought that he might one day lose faith in the witch, he would never utter it aloud, nor ever wish her to hear it. But that notion had always seemed utterly impossible to him. Thus, in accordance with the witch's words, he had convinced himself that he would never be defeated by anyone. The day that faith was shattered, in a sense, was the day Aldebaran had truly died. Death was something he had experienced so many times that even keeping account seemed a fool's errand. And though he had always considered keeping account to be the fool's errand, he did so anyway, simply because he had been told to. Yet, even as he kept track of the actual number, the absurdity of it all never faded in the slightest. Even so, he believed that on that day, at that moment, he had tasted death in its truest form. Having gone so far as to build up Aldebaran for the sake of her dearest wish, the witch had prepared for him the sole battle in his lifetime that he absolutely could not afford to lose. And yet, at the juncture where you could not afford to lose, you were defeated. A familiar plain of lush, verdant grass, and the form of the witch sat by the white table of the tea party, enjoying the aroma of tea. Upon seeing her, Aldebaran was immediately stricken with despair, crushed by the depth of his own sin. Employing only black and white, the highest pinnacle of beauty that could be achieved was the witch. And now, the fact that there existed not a single wound upon that odious, attractive figure of hers was proof that this was indeed a world of dreams. Did he see her die? After all, when Aldebaran had failed to win the battle he had needed to win no matter what, the witch had sacrificed all 4 of her limbs to shield him, leaving her a wretched figure able to do nothing but await death? What? 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 She died saving Al? Oh my god, no. No way. Oh my, no way. No fucking way. Oh my god. If I don't understand this by the end, please someone put in the comments like help me understand. Oh my god, what the fuck? What? After all, when Aldebaran had failed to win the battle he had needed to win no matter what, the witch had sacrificed all 4 of her limbs to shield him, leaving her a wretched figure, unable to do nothing but await death. As he had stared at her in shock, Aldebaran had found himself vaguely thinking the painfully obvious. Even the witch had red blood coursing through her veins. Oh my god! The heat, the odor, the feel, the blood could not have possibly been a lie. In that case, this world, where all of that had been lost, where make-believe had painted over the reality that should have been, was not more than a blatant bundle of lies. What the fuck? What the fuck? Oh my god, bro. Dude. You know that we're in here for a movie, but like, oh my god. That's crazy. Chat, what the actual fuck? What the fuck? The only thing that I got spoiled was the name of Aldebaran. That was it. It just came out. There was only one thing I got spoiled from like all of this. Nothing else. Oh my god, what the actual fuck? Dude, what does this even mean? Oh my god, what? I was thinking that Al was a created construct of the fake Echidna. Who is Al? Oh my god, who is Al? Oh my god. That's crazy. That's so crazy. Oh my god, what? Oh my god. In that case, what? A bundle of lies? What? Make believe. I'm rather unfound of that expression. Well, strictly speaking, it is not the same world. I cannot help but be reminded of an unpleasant individual. Whether that was the witch's own way of joking, or if she had just wished to express how she felt regardless of whether it was an appropriate time to say it, Aldebaran had been unable to grasp the witch's true feelings, even at the very end. Only he was convinced she hated him. Or perhaps in despair, he thought she might have completely forsaken him. However, your arm. It seems unlikely that there is any way for you to get it back. The witch's gaze fell upon Aldebaran's left arm, taken by shadow from the shoulder down. Were they trying to fight Satella? There was no pain. That only served as more proof that this place was the witch's castle of dreams. Were he to return to reality, his brain would likely be scorched by unimaginable pain. And that was something that could no longer be overturned by means of death. A true injury that would never fade. The first possessor of the divine protection of the Shinigami, robbed of your arm, you lost the battle you could not afford to lose against Satella. This was against Satella. It appears as though my plan has ended in failure. I can just picture my friends saying all sorts of things. Ultimately, it shall be left up to those who seek to carry on Flugel's will. This is the first time I've heard Flugel in like fucking arcs. Ultimately, it shall be left up to those who seek to carry on Flugel's will. How frustrating. The thought that his defeat would take everything from the witch was unbearably painful. Without seeking anyone else's understanding, she had parted ways with her fellow witches and the companions who had journeyed alongside her. Also, she could attempt to fulfill her wish, but Aldebaran had ruined all of that. What? The cruelest part of it all was that even though he understood that much, the passion and determination he had carried before his defeat would not return to Aldebaran's hollow soul. Having lost a battle he could not afford to lose, Aldebaran's heart had been shattered. The soul battle in his lifetime were bereft. Dude, what the fuck? The soul battle in his lifetime where defeat was not permitted had ground Aldebaran's heart into tiny little pieces. That was by witnessing the inevitable death of the person closest to him in this world, the witch. Aldebaran would likely suffer a wound beyond recovery in the truest sense. There is nobody who can defeat you, you whom I created. Hence, Aldebaran did not understand the meaning of those words spoken to him once more. Now that it has come to this, we need not concern ourselves with appearances any longer. Let us change the victory conditions. We shall leave them to deal with her. Meanwhile, we shall focus on preventing secondary damages. The witch was both wise and selfish. Disregarding Aldebaran, who was still left at a loss, his mind unable to think straight due to his immense feelings of guilt, she came to a conclusion all on her own, leaving no room for objection as she forced the conversation along. The altered conditions for victory, the newly presented objective of preventing secondary damages. Regardless, he did not even believe that was something he could accomplish. After all, Aldebaran had already failed. He had failed, and yet, there is nobody who can defeat you, you whom I created. Aldebaran could not fathom what had caused the witch to say that. Without saying much to Aldebaran, still stunned as he stood fixed in place, the witch rose and began slowly walking towards him, before coming to stand face to face with him. The witch's face, the one he had gazed upon more than any other in his lifetime. On it, there emerged an expression he had never witnessed before. the time at which something is most powerful or successful. This series is the zenith of storytelling. Your stars were bad. It was not Aldebaran's fault. He could tell that was the meaning underpinning those words. Before he could come to terms with the emotions welling up inside of him, the castle of dreams abruptly came to an end. Akin to tearing up the very paper stage of Kamishibai. Kamishibai? That sounds familiar as fuck. Traditional Japanese storytelling method that uses illustrated cards to create a paper play or paper theater. What? It was a terribly violent manner of conclusion. That which awaited him on the other side was a grim reality. That instant, his brain was dominated by pain and feelings of loss, fresh blood, and the din in the air undermining his comprehension. Heaven and earth had been stained with a black so somber that there no longer existed any semblance of time, and Aldebaran's wails were drowned out by the screeches of the world crumbling, unable to even reach his own ears. Merely in a world where just about everything had fallen apart, despite being in the midst of the cacophony so loud he could not even hear his own voice. He somehow managed to properly hear that blurred, frail, gasping sound. A voice he wished not to let slip, the witch's final incantation. Ol Shamak. The next time Aldebaran's consciousness returned was after everything had ended, or rather, when that which had ended began anew. And that new beginning came to an end. What if Al was a sage? No. Came to a new end before beginning and ending all over again. It seemed like after that had repeated many times over and over and over again, the world had been left without any traces of the witch. Whether it was due to a difference in preconditions or simply because it had been performed by the tremendous power of the witch, the shock he felt at how the spell's efficacy differed from when he himself had wielded it lasted for only a moment. Hey you, where'd you come from? Who are you? That question was delivered by the voice of the person completely unknown to him. A man dressed in attire that was every bit as shabby as Aldebaran's disheveled appearance stared at Aldebaran, Castelia City, with trepidation and caution tinging his eyes. The words he could understand, his experience with human interaction was scarce, but in a sense, that was not a problem either. What mattered was figuring out where he was and when. Gudenhive. It's the Gladiator Island. Which? That's a thing from like hundreds of years ago, right? So this bitch can send other people to different times too? What the fuck is happening? What the fuck is happening? The man... Nah. I'm sorry. What the actual fuck? This motherfucker top A, like, damn it. The man seemed puzzled, as if he had been asked something strange. And receiving his words, Aldebaran let out an exhale. Gazing over that, the man's expression shifted from puzzled to startled. After all, and his exhale morphed into sobbing. Aldebaran crumbled to the ground, a flood of tears streaming down his face. There is nobody who can defeat you, you whom I created. The words of the witch whom he had left hundreds of years behind in the past still clung to his soul, refusing to let go, for the sin of having returned that person into a liar. Aldebaran had wished to die, but die he could not. Arc 9, Chapter 53, Aldebaran 2. Sorry for rehashing the same punchline, but it's the return of my trump card. Upon declaring so, a boulder of immense mass came hurtling down from straight above. His plan resigned to be not more than an unoriginal rehash. Aldebaran watched as Amelia's expression shifted mid-flight, evading the colossal stone arms reaching out towards her from the cliff sides. First widening her eyes at the sight of the massive boulder, then as the regret of having completely allowed Aldebaran to escape at the royal capital emerged on her cheeks and her kenti. She firmly held her eyes shut to ensure her heart would not be claimed by the same senses of defeat. After a momentary feeling of weakness spent wondering, can I really do it? The giant boulder was reflected in her open sights, and she fired herself up as if to say, I have no choice but to do it. Facing forward with even more strength in her gaze than there had been before that moment of doubt. These many shifts in her expressions had transpired over the course of a single second, so it was incredible just how quickly she had regained her composure. But motivation alone ain't gonna cut it. Scraping and chipping away at the craggy cliffs of the canyon, the giant boulder plummeted. The first maneuver Amelia attempted with her renewed motivation was to conjure a massive ice cap in the trajectory of the falling boulder in order to catch its weight. However, Aldebaran countered by firing a stone cannonball with his magic, blasting through the canyon wall to nullify her gambit. With the jagged walls demolished, the ice cap could no longer fit perfectly across the canyon's breadth, merely becoming another falling obstacle alongside the massive boulder. In that case, as soon as she saw the ice cap had failed to catch the boulder, Amelia immediately moved to the next countermeasure. Once again carrying wings of ice upon her back after they had been purged, she enacted the rebirth of an angel while bending her long legs, then positioning the soles of her feet on top of the legs of the ice soldiers kicking up from directly below, receiving leg strength that the original Natsuki Suru could never have mustered. She soared through the air. Caught off guard by Amelia's ferocious acceleration, the hundreds of arms emerging from the cliffs all failed to catch her, allowing the angel to escape. No, allowing her to charge Aldebaran. While Aldebaran had been diverting his focus to intercepting her, his momentum had fallen, allowing for Amelia's rush forward to rapidly close the distance. Ye had been left behind to buy him time, but he had completely forfeited the advantage she had created for him. So he could hear her bitter voice saying, trying to support you truly is pointless, Al-sama. Though, it's only if I get caught here. Retorting to the imaginary words of Ye, Aldebaran met Amelia's charge with a barrage of stone bullets, but Amelia sublimely twisted her body through air to avoid the next rehash following the falling boulder. Seriously? The fact that she had accomplished that with artificial wings that by no means should have been allowed such freedom of movement left Aldebaran aghast. Naturally, the angel wings made the ice. The wings made of ice could not be flapped. The true origin of Amelia's three-dimensional maneuver just now was smaller ice wings that had been added on below the main ice wings. By overlapping several wings of ice, she had yielded a chance in how they sliced the wind, providing functionality that allowed her to apply edge control by tilting her body. Even that aerodynamic solution was undoubtedly accomplished by her natural senses. I'll catch up! Even if she veered side to side in order to evade, Amelia kept her loss of speed to a minimum. As she exclaimed, the distance between the two of them vanished. At that speed, Amelia would likely make it out of the falling boulder's blast radius in time. With the blow he had intended as a trump card so easily sidestepped, Aldebaran's situation was truly dire, or that was what should have been the mutual perception of the two parties involved. Amelia's large amethyst eyes opened wide, painted in a color of shock. From her point of view, Aldebaran had not taken any exceptional action, while he still continued firing a volley of stones that failed to hit her. Neither had he deployed any new magic, nor had he performed any extreme maneuvers to evade her. The same went for his response to Amelia's flight, momentum bolstered by borrowing the strength of the ice soldiers. At this rate, she would catch up to him, and he would no longer be able to avoid her freezing fingertips. That was to say, Amelia had met her victory conditions in this situation. Nevertheless, there was no delight or satisfaction to be found in Amelia's eyes. That was because, didn't I tell you? Same punchline. A colossal boulder plummeted down. In exchange for the prevention of the damage it would bring about, Aldebaran had been allowed to escape his battle against Amelia in the royal castle. Hence, even if it was uninspired, he carried out a plan that had already proved successful once. However, this time, there was no innocent people here who could be caught up in this. Indeed, no innocent people. Ow! As she shouted, Amelia recklessly reached her hand out towards Aldebaran, toward the sole being other than Amelia who could be caught up in the wrath of the falling stone. That settles it. You've done well to survive Sparka. From this point forward, you cannot count yourself among the gladiators of this gladiator island. Welcome him aboard, you damn good-for-nothings. A ruckus welcome of cheering were indistinguishable from the sound of angry jeers. Following that reception, Aldebaran fell to his knees and leaned against the massive corpse as coarse and vulgar cheers engulfed the arena. He was languidly resting against the remains of the witch beast, the guilty law that had died from the sword deeply piercing its thick neck. Having lost its right foreleg, along with both of its rear legs, the guilty law had died with an expression that conveyed bewilderment and confusion more so than it did agony. Beholding that pitiful, deathly visage, Aldebaran was taken by a deep sorrow, and his shoulders heaved with ragged breaths, though he was immediately disgusted with himself for how terribly deceitful that symphony was. You managed to survive, huh? Color me surprised. Greeting that tattered Aldebaran, a man of shabby appearance, he was a gladiator of the Gladiator Island, the very one who had found Aldebaran when he had initially woken up. The man's expression was complex. likely because he found it utterly incomprehensible that Aldebaran had managed to survive the rite of passage for newcomers, Sparka. From his perspective, having been ordered to tend to Aldebaran's needs as an unlucky person who had first discovered him, he might have felt that Aldebaran dying in this Sparka would have prevented those troubles from dragging on for too long. Regardless, Aldebaran's survival had been a shock to the man, but he was not the only one who had been surprised. Aldebaran, too, could not hide his astonishment at his own survival. Having suffered defeat in a battle he could not afford to lose, Aldebaran had left deserted in the foreign surroundings. Wait, no. Here's what I'm gonna say. The reason why they infernalized Subaru was because if he had appeared in his same visions and his same fucking attire, if he appeared at the same age looking in the Sparka, everyone would have like noticed like this is the dude that survived X amount of years ago. There's no fucking way. There's no shot. There's no shot. That's not it. No. There's no shot. There's no shot. That's why they did that. Like they made like Tape didn't make Subaru turn into a kid because he wanted to like make the new fucking arcs feel different for Subaru. That could be a case. No, literally, if we're going off of this, if Aldebaran went into the Sparka looking like Subaru with like half his arm cut off in the same attire, there is no fucking way that if Subaru, that's why they changed his fucking fit in Arc 6. This motherfucker's a genius. He's a genius. Genius writer. Genius writer. Holy shit. A genius writer. Genius fucking writer. Genius fucking writer. No way. No way. No way. No fucking way. That's crazy. That's crazy. Oh my god, bro. Because he needed to have a new identity when he went into Sparka. Oh my god, bro. Dude. Are y'all picking up on this shit at the same time as I am? Like please. Oh my god, what the fuck? I don't even know where I am. I'm gonna start right here. Fuck it. Aldebaran too could not hide his astonishment at his own survival. Having suffered defeat in a battle he could not afford to lose, Aldebaran had been left deserted in these foreign surroundings. And he didn't know. He was put like 400 years later. Oh my god, this story is fucking peak. An unknown environment, unfamiliar people, the rules lacking sufficient explanation to Aldebaran. This was certainly an uncivilized land, as if he had been cast into a brand new world, isekai. The only thing of which he could be certain was that he had likely lost all value in his own existence, and that he probably even lost the only one who would have mourned his loss in worth. That was why. Even though you say you wanted to die, I guess that was all talk. Equal parts sarcasm and spite, the man's words carved deeply into Aldebaran's heart. With the defeat of his first battle, upon realizing that he had survived the end and surely ought to have awaited him, Aldebaran was consumed by unceasing feelings of loss and remorse, yearning for death from the depths of his heart. That was the Sparka. The trial by which newcomers were tested on the Gladiator Island seemed all too convenient for Aldebaran at this time. The blunt, offhand explanation had been mercilessly unkind, but in short, they were being forced to put their lives on the line through trial and combat, where for any who had failed to prove themselves as gladiators, death alone would await. For Aldebaran, who could not help but wish to die, it was all far too convenient. In fact, when Aldebaran was taken to the arena along with the four newcomers in the same circumstances, and thereupon forced to face off against a guilty law, he had fully intended on being killed without offering up any resistance. But despite that, Aldebaran had survived. The other men fought back, ran away, or pleaded for their lives, only to be slaughtered all the same, leaving Aldebaran as the last man standing. The witch beast's claws tore into him, shattering his ribs as it trampled him underfoot. And he was supposed to have met his death there, blood frothing at the mouth. And yet, there is nobody who can defeat you, you whom I created. In the instant, those words had flashed through his mind, Aldebaran had expanded his territory. Compared to the opponent he had challenged hundreds of millions of times, yet still could not overcome. This Sparka, which had only managed to kill him 304 times, was no agony to Aldebaran whatsoever. After all, dude, this is the second best character in all of ReZero. This is the second best character in all of ReZero. Literally, how can you write a better character than the MC done dirty for plot? Not even that, like, it's even worse. Oh my god, what the fuck, dude? Compared to the opponent he had challenged hundreds of millions of times. Yet, okay, I'm skimming the next one. After all, the true agony only came after, in the self-questioning that haunted him for having survived. Why? For what? For what reason? Had he not died? You want to hear about the outside? Even you ask me. It's been a long time since I arrived there. Recognized as a gladiator, Aldebaran had gained the right to live on the island. Within the island, cut off from the outside world, he had learned that this was a part of the Valachian Empire that the gladiators imprisoned here were forced to fight in death matches for spectacle. And that public order on the island had collapsed. But there was still much more he wished to know. As a result, the one subjected to Aldebaran's persistent questioning was the gladiator responsible for taking care of him. If you say it's not about anything recent, but history that you want to learn about, I don't know all too much about it either, yeah? Well, if it's about a witch, I at least know about the Witch of Envy, but... When he had asked just to be sure, he was first surprised by that the gladiator even known about a witch, and recited as if it were too terrifying to speak aloud. The witch's legend, as it was known today, it delivered onto him an even greater shock. For the tale had come to refer to only one, the Witch of Envy. The Witch of Envy, who, threatening to plunge the world into ruin, had been sealed away at the hands of the three heroes. This world possessed no legends of the other witches, and records pertaining to the witches of Sin were nowhere to be found. Moreover, hearing that it had been nearly 400 years since those events had transpired, Aldebaran fell into despair. 400 years, that long. Long passage of time had erased any trace of the witches of Sin from this world. But to think that it would go as far as to even forget the existence of the witch, the very witch who had attempted to fulfill her promise, even if it meant giving up on everything. But what was even more cruel? The Witch of Greed? The hell is that? Some kind of delusion of yours? Aldebaran had no words with which to respond to the man's suspicion. There was no way it was a delusion. The days Aldebaran had spent alongside the witch were certainly present within him. Her teachings, the torch of her fingertips, the words she had spoken to him. He remembered it, all of it. In this world, against the witch who concealed dreadful power, there had certainly been another witch who had attempted to fight back. Aldebaran was her student, and he was the witch's trump card. Okay, so I am currently in the process of rereading certain parts because wait, you know what? Hold on. All right, I'm going to be re-recording a certain part because like I was not in the best state of mind and it was not great. Anyway, so I'm gonna pick back up where I was like trailing off. So shit, the fuck's wrong with you? Even though all I did was answer everything you asked me, you start swinging at me out of nowhere, out of the blue. Okay, I cooked it. Anyway, so spat the man who had been struck by Aldebaran. The latter enraged upon. Whoa, wait. So he's. Did he spawn in real time with one arm? The latter enraged upon being denied the existence. Wait, oh shit, wait. Oh yeah. The latter enraged upon being denied the existence of the witch, having been tossed into this environment. No, into this brand new world. That was how his relationship ended with the benefactor who had first shown him kindness. With the other gladiators as well, things broke down into a similar fashion, isolating Aldebaran from his fellows. A deviant enthralled by the witch, many times he had heard such rumors about himself. It seemed that his benefactor had taken the initiative to spread them around. But in a sense, it was a valid assessment. He had no intention of correcting it. However, it aggravated him to be likened to some incomprehensible group known as the witch cult. Upon asking, it seemed like they were a group who heralded the revival of the witch, going around and committing acts of terrorism all over. Once more, he flew into a rage, demanding them not to lump him in with such individuals, but this only caused his reputation to be tarnished even further. A witch-crazed nut like you, you'll never die a decent death. During the death match arranged at the discretion of the then governor of the Gladiator Island, those were the dying words of the first benefactor who showed to show him kindness, slain by the barbarian's sword in Aldebaran's hand. Oh. Wiping the blood of his benefactor off, Aldebaran took a moment to ponder those final words of spite. You'll never die a decent death. Before nodding deeply in agreement, there was no doubt about those words. With his territory going strong, Aldebaran had continued to survive his death matches on the Gladiator Island. Those who called Aldebaran witch-crazed nut were all eventually pitted against him in death matches, and without fail, they all fell before his barbarian sword. He did not care about enacting revenge, nor did he have any desire to clear the witch's dishonor. To begin with, rather than being dishonored, the fate that had befallen the witches was that of having their very existences erased. Hence, Aldebaran did not seek a reason for his continued survival from the witch, only he wished to learn why he had been allowed to live. In order to... I can't believe we're doing this fucking like name chapter. In order to ascertain that reason, he could not afford to die. Surviving the initial Sparta and continuing to survive the death matches thereafter, it was all for that purpose. And so, using his territory while suffering hundreds of deaths each time he crossed blades with an opponent, he trampled the lives of all sorts of gladiators underfoot and lived. He lived, and he kept on living. Well, it's hard to keep living when you can't die. And then, you've done well to survive. I take my hat off to the devilish luck that allowed you to best even one so far above yourself. Indeed, upon witnessing the triumph of Aldebaran, who had grasped even the most infinitesimal chance of victory in order to slay an opponent who had utterly outclassed him, the governor voiced words of praise that were not quite discernible as either as astonishment or admiration. You know what I'm thinking right now? If he already knew about Natsuki Subaru before going to the future, that has to give like more credence to the fact that Subaru was there before the time skip. Like, this is quite literally pointing towards Subaru being the sage, him being the one who helped seal Satella. I just don't know how it can like tie back into Amelia though. It definitely can't be Echidna, because like Echidna is a fucking bitch. She doesn't treat Amelia like she could be like her child. Dude, there's just so many more whys and like whats than questions being answered, Loki. Where am I? Casting aside his broken barbarian sword, Aldebaran turned his back to the arena. Scarce on cheer as it was, for the moment of his awakening, the first decade on the Gladiator Island went by in a flash. There is nobody who can defeat you, you whom I created. Those 10 years were long, relentlessly scraping away at Aldebaran's humanity. The face, voice, and warmth that he ought to have vividly recalled whenever he closed his eyes were instead being painted over by deathly visages, death throes, and cold blood of those he had killed with his own hands. There is nobody who can defeat you, you whom I created. That was correct. Those words were correct. Certainly nobody could kill Aldebaran. Over his past 10 years on Gladiator Island, he had been summoned to Sparta on many occasions, faced countless brushes with death in the arena matches, and had come to kill many of the experts and inhuman beings who utterly outmatched him. In response to Aldebaran's repeated upsets, it was not merely once or twice that death matches were arranged to try to kill him. And since there was always a promising gladiator killed on those occasions, Aldebaran had begun to acquire somewhat of an untouchable status. There is nobody who can defeat you, you whom I created. After a decade, the faces on Gladiator Island were completely different than when he had first arrived. Aldebaran had long since become one of its oldest members, and there no longer remained a single person aware of the rumors that he was a deviant enthralled by the witch. Ever since Aldebaran had learned of the taboo regarding the subject of the witch, and the fact that most people did not know anything beyond the surface of the legend, he had completely stopped bringing up the topic. However, that was not a change brought about by things such as disappointment or resignation from not getting any of the answers he desired. Rather, it was something far more serious. There is nobody who can defeat you, you whom I created. I'm gonna check something. Real quick. Okay. Where am I? Okay. For 10 years, forced to fight to the death while stranded on the Gladiator Island, in that place where transactions of life and death were repeated ad nauseum. What had consumed Aldebaran was a sense of immersion, or a sense of immense despair. Had the witch truly existed? It was a despair that called her very existence into question. There is nobody who can defeat you, you whom I created. If he closed his eyes, he could certainly hear that voice. He remembered it being spoken to him. But even so, that was truly something. Was that truly something that had happened? Okay, like, it's crazy that now his memories are starting to get like fucked up when like he literally died over a million times with the Witch of Greed. Like, there's no way that you would forget the amount of time that you spent with that person. Even if like 400 years were to go by and you're like asleep, or just like you just kind of wake up 400 years later, there's no reason why, even in the countless deaths that you could have on Gladiator Island, that you would not be able to remember Echidna. Like, realistically, that doesn't make any sense. Where am I? But even so, that was truly something that had happened? Or was that truly something that had happened? There is nobody who can defeat you, you whom I created. The witch's face he could no longer recall. The witch's voice he could no longer recall. The witch's warmth he could no longer recall. For 10 years, his recollections wore thin. Like a videotape he would watch back whenever he had a moment to spare. Even if he tried to splice the torn tape back together, playback remained impossible, with even the tape itself eventually turning to dust. When the memories themselves scattered away in such a manner, and the dust completely fell through the gaps between his fingers, Aldebaran was no longer able to tell. Had the witch truly existed? Were Aldebaran's memories events that had actually happened? There is nobody who can defeat you, you whom I created. At times, he would feel an overwhelming urge to destroy his own existence. Whenever that happened, Aldebaran would enter a death match whilst deliberately undoing his territory, and by allowing himself to be thoroughly beaten up with his life truly at stake, he would attempt to gaze into the abyss of death. No, not only did he gaze, he would even think just letting himself fall in. However, only on such occasions, the territory would save Aldebaran by taking on an unexpected form. There is nobody who can defeat you, you whom I created. Is this build up for like the aggressor and victim mode? This has to be. Oh yeah, this has to be that. As if to validate the words of the witch who possibly did not exist, there were several times when an opponent on the verge of killing Aldebaran abruptly succumbed to mental collapse right before his eyes. Each time an opponent's eyes went white, having lost both sanity and fighting spirit alike, Aldebaran would feel as if there were some invisible force keeping him alive. And overcome with frustration, he would lop off the opponent's head. Even after a decade, Aldebaran did not understand the purpose for which he had been kept alive. On the contrary, he was not even sure if there really was anything that had tried to keep him alive. There is nobody who can defeat you, you whom I created. Only he was terrified that everything that had shaped him was a lie. the witch's efforts and words had never truly existed. That Aldebaran truly was just a lunatic enthralled by the witch. With such self-doubt gnawing at his heart, he endured many years of sleepless nights. There is nobody who can defeat you, you whom I created. Those words once served as Aldebaran's lifeline, the very foundation upon which his being had been shaped, but now they were terrifying beyond recognition. That this was all just a product of his delusions. Is that where like the heroic delusions come from? Or heroic reveries? The very foundation upon which his being had been shaped, but now they were terrifying beyond recognition. This was all just a product of his delusions. That the duty Aldebaran had carried, the encounters and partings he ought to have had, might never have existed at all. Such doubts only continue to haunt him. There is nobody who can defeat you, you whom I created. An unending spiral of self-questioning. Wait, what the fuck? Okay. An unending spiral of self-questioning. A sensation as if he were mired in a swamp of unanswerable, bottomless despair. Sunk up to his chest and unable to move. And so, the time in which only the manner of his death remained unsettled seemed as though it would stretch on forever. However, on a certain day, Aldebaran's long gaze of stagnation quite suddenly arrived at a turning point. And that turning point being, "Hear me! Rabble scattered across Gladiator Island!" Booming through the speaking tubes across the island was a voice of a young girl, tinged with heat as fierce as flame. The simultaneous revolt of the gladiators and the plot to assassinate the new emperor by using that revolt was a diversion. What? Okay. We kind of skipped a little bit of stuff, not gonna lie. I feel like we skipped something. Why the fuck did we go so far so fast? Dude. This shit's so good. Sorry for like the poor reading up until like a certain point. Like I literally had to cut this shit out and redo it. Anyway. Man. I feel like we're probably like halfway done with the chapter, but I don't want it to be done because I feel like we're not gonna get enough. I feel like there's still so much more that we have to get, and I'm not like we've gotten a lot, right? Like we've gotten quite a lot, but I still feel like there's a little bit more, and there's probably like a few more things that's really gonna set everything off. Man. This chapter has been fucking insane. And it's gonna be like the longest chapter reading yet, so, or chapters reading. So I hope you guys are enjoying it so far. Where am I? Okay, that seemed to have been the reality of the turning point that had befallen Aldebaran. Be that as it may, there was no way all the details would have been granted to a mere gladiator of the Gladiator Island, nor did Aldebaran even want to know any further details. For the time being, since there had been no change in the management of the island, he simply assumed that the administration had not been overthrown either. At the very least, a change of emperor at this point in time was not something Aldebaran had known about. But if there was just one thing during this incident that had caused Aldebaran to truly feel profound transformation within himself, it was obvious. He had rescued a silver-haired girl who had fallen into dire straits. Huh? Huh? Of course, that incident had nothing to do with Aldebaran's original objective. The silver-haired girl was a young dog person, okay, whom he had happened across, and she had no connection whatsoever to the silver-haired individual with whom Aldebaran had been involved. However, the fact that he had saved that girl, in the voice of the flame-like girl amidst the revolt that had demonstrated an attitude of selfishly following one's own path, had allowed Aldebaran to make up his mind. What? What? Doesn't make any sense. The silver-haired girl was a young dog person whom he had happened across, and she had no connection whatsoever to the silver-haired individual with whom Aldebaran had been involved. However, the fact that he had saved that girl in the voice of the flame-like girl amidst the revolt that had demonstrated an attitude of selfishly following one's own path, had allowed Aldebaran to make up his mind. He would venture beyond this closed-off world in order to verify the existence of the witch. There is nobody who can defeat you, you whom I created. Jesus Christ. After being killed over and over again by the aquatic witch beast let loose in the lake, Aldebaran finally escaped the island which had held him captive for over 10 years, and disembarked on a land that was not surrounded by water. Strictly speaking, the world as a whole was encircled by the great waterfall, so it could be said that there was actually no land that was not surrounded by water. The fact that he could come up with a quip like that showed that he was still able to at least fake some cheer. To Aldebaran, those words were a malediction, consolation, a binding, and a forgiveness. In order to discern the color, the heat, and uncertain certainty of that ambiguous and directionless wellspring of such overwhelming emotion, Aldebaran had decided to pursue the traces of the witch. There was not much time to spare. During the decade he had spent on the closed-off island, the world Aldebaran walked had unexpectedly been drawn closer to the world Aldebaran remembered. All that remained was to ascertain whether the things within Aldebaran were genuine or not. And so, what was required to ascertain that? What was evidence of the witch? For what reason does the gospel hold no account of your existence? Speaking those words was a Sin Archbishop of the Witch Cult, who tilted his head far more than was necessary. Although Aldebaran had a rough idea as to the reason why, he fiddled with the metal fixtures of his helmet and gave an evasive comment. The jet black steel helmet he had begun to wear in those days was a parting gift he had taken with him from the Gladiator Island, and he found that its sturdiness and full-face cover often came in handy. It seemed like this profusely loud and animated Sin Archbishop did not take kindly to the fact that there was not a single account of such a conspicuous person in his oh-so-precious gospel. You truly are slothful, aren't you? In all honesty, the battle against this Sin Archbishop was among the most challenging encounters of Aldebaran's life. To begin with, winning without dying a single time was something he lacked experience in, but even so, this was a formidable enemy who made it difficult to seize any chance of victory. In the end, while he might have satisfied the conditions for victory, he did not win. Even when compared to the witches of sin, to the women who, just like the witch, potentially did not exist, his viciousness seemed to stack up favorably. Anyhow, there is nobody who can defeat you, you whom I created. With his honor preserved by those words, and having secured the information he desired, Aldebaran had pondered. In order to ascertain the existence of the witch, the ones most likely to possess the information he sought were the members of the heretical organization he had often heard about, even on the Gladiator Island, the Witch Cult. They seemed to be a group who hid themselves away in places completely unknown, but that was only if one was attempting to track them down, as luring them out was not particularly difficult. Certainly, if rumors were to be spread about the Witch of Envy, so worshipped by the Witch Cult, there were some who would come rushing to the scene. But then again, if one could not handle whatever came rushing their way, they would simply suffer through the world's most foolish way to die, being mercilessly robbed of their life. Huh, dude, this has been quite a fucking reading, bro. Sorry if any of this has been too cooked. So he meets Beetlejuice, of course. But I wonder where and under what circumstances. As we continue on, yet another. You must cease at once. This is blasphemy. Satella. Any other than Satella? To speak of... Oh. To speak of any other... Wait. To speak of any witch other than the Witch of Envy? It is the height of sacrilege. As the one who graces me with the favor of her love, she is the only one worthy of once more descending upon this world. Her alone. He knew. Okay, well, alright. I can see why he would be asking him, though. Damn. The world really did forget about the other witches. Huh. He knew not just how much credence he could give to the excuse me, sorry. He knew not just how much credence he could give to the utterances of the Sin Archbishop, whose aberrant demeanor and conduct bereft of sanity had accumulated to an extremely vast amount. But even if that madman's ramblings held no meaning to anyone else, they held meaning to Aldebaran. There is nobody who can defeat you, you whom I created. Tenaciously retrying his encounter with the Sin Archbishop, he would draw out the words, engage in the necessary back and forth, and give up his life each time he triggered a fit of rage. Then, back to the beginning. By single-mindedly creating that process, Aldebaran obtained the information he desired from the Sin Archbishop. Then, passing right by the Sin Archbishop who had come rushing to the scene, he had made it so that their encounter had never happened. Sloth! As Aldebaran evaded the witch cult's encirclement and absconded, He pictured the Sin Archbishop letting out a blood-curdling shriek after failing to catch him. But that no longer mattered to him. At this moment, there existed but one desire within Aldebaran: the confirmation of the witch's existence. Of how the lives of the witches of Sin had been extinguished, he was aware. The Witch of Wrath had perished in madness after being caught in a trap. The Witch of Lust had been immolated in a great fire. Gotta look up some English real quick. Immol. Damn. Sacrifice in a great fire. The Witch of Gluttony had withered to death in a sea of sand. In the sea of sand. In the Agria sand dunes? The Witch of Pride had drowned in the Great Flood. The Witch of Sloth had fallen into the Great Waterfall as she massacred the dragon. Then, the Witch of Envy had been sealed away at the edge of the world. And the final witch. I see. The ability to enter this place from outside the tomb is quite the structural flaw indeed. Just like the mechanisms of the sanctuary. The finishing touches are rather lacking though. I suppose some aspects of that were unavoidable. A plain of lush, verdant grass beneath an unrealistic blue sky, stretching out as far as the eye could see. As a cool breeze blew across, a white table and parasol were placed atop a small hill. Unmistakably, that was the scene of the memories which had been on the verge of fading from within Aldebaran. Present right at the heart of it all, was a beautiful being who could be described with just the colors of white and black. Why must love fade? After many twists and turns, he had finally made his homecoming to the Castle of Dreams. Doubting his own sanity, Aldebaran had almost believed that it might have even been an illusion. A reunion which spanned over a decade for the student, and across 4 centuries for the other party. With her existence verified, the witch, nay, the Witch of Greed, wearing a smile bereft of blood, voiced that celebratory remark. Aldebaran had lived life with one arm longer than he'd ever had with 2. Hence, he hardly ever felt much of a handicap for only having his right arm. But regardless, he still found it to be an inconvenience on extremely rare occasions. For instance, the times when he had had no choice but to carry an unconscious person. Please bear with the ruggedness. Carried in Aldebaran's arm as he uttered so. Held together with the magic stone forged process was the limp, unconscious body. carried in Aldebaran's arm as he uttered so, held together with the magic stone forged prosthesis, was the limp, unconscious body of Amelia. Amelia's aerial chase of Aldebaran that had commenced in the vast canyon had come to a conclusion, with Amelia collapsing due to Aldebaran's use of foul play. It was nothing substantial. The trump card was the same one that he had played in order to escape Amelia's clutches back in the royal capital. Amelia, kind-hearted as she was, could not allow anybody to be lost in the midst of battle. She too was one who, with the passing of Priscilla during the Empire's great disaster, had sustained a deep wound to her heart. Therefore, in order to protect Aldebaran, who had remained in the trajectory on course to receive a direct hit from the falling boulder, she did not hesitate to throw herself in harm's way. Even though there wasn't any other way to reliably land an attack on her, it's a scummy strategy even for me. Of course, that was Aldebaran's conclusion after having attempted various other stratagems in trial and error. He had tried adjusting the positioning of the boulder's fall, smashing the boulder to create a rock avalanche, setting its trajectory with a barrage of stone projectiles, and incorporating all sorts of different magic. But outside the stratagem of using himself as a hostage, Amelia always managed to find a flash of inspiration and intuitive judgment for the circumstance, admirably surmounting all of them. None of the foolish Aldebarans who had enacted those other stratagems had managed to avoid a future of being frozen by Amelia's fingertips. So it could be said that he had no other means but to rely on such a desperate measure. Though it doesn't make the guilt go away, nor does it mean I'll be forgiven. An excuse for no ears save his own, so childish that not even Amelia would forgive it. Shielding Aldebaran, Amelia defensively brushed the mass of huge crag, and as the powerful impact ran through her entire body, even she would let go of her consciousness. From what he could tell from her appearance, it did not seem like she had sustained any lasting injuries, just a strong concussion at worst. To ensure that that was the case, many careful adjustments have been made. Seems like I've been put on quite the detour. Waiting on Ye wouldn't exactly be the smartest move, now wouldn't it? Now that the fall from high altitude and chase sequence with Amelia ended, he finally had enough leeway to ascertain his surroundings. What he had gleaned by doing so was that this place was likely the Agzod Canyon, the largest canyon in the entire world, and the fact that he had been placed at a significantly different elevation from his destination of the Grand Mogulate Geyser. They were already past the national border with the Kingdom of Lagunica, and were well into the Kararagi city-states, but it would take a considerable amount of time to climb back up the thousands of meters he had fallen so that he could return to his original route. Besides, setting Alter aside, is it even possible to reconvene with Roy and the old man? Amongst the henchmen he had pulled ahead from, he had no anxiety regarding Aldebaran's strength, but he was greatly concerned about the abilities of and humanity of Roy Alfard and Heinkel. Of course, Roy's actions were restricted by the curse mark, so he would not break the rules if he valued his own life. Either way, the best I can do is expect everyone to gather at the meeting spot. The maximum priority for Aldebaran was reaching the Grand Mogulate Geyser and accomplishing his objective. He would need to borrow Aldebaran's strength for that objective, but in the worst case, it was not as though he had no means by which to do something about it even without Aldebaran. In addition, the power of Roy's authority of gluttony was indispensable to dealing with the aftermath of the calamity he had employed for the sake of his plan. At the end, he wants him to have his name eaten. He wants his name to be eaten at the end. That's what it is. Okay. Okay. How does that affect Satella though? I'm like, I'm so curious. Yes, he would need to find a way to reconvene after he fulfilled his objective, and somehow get them to follow his instructions. Trying to avert secondary damage is only to cause tertiary and quaternary damages. Some help I am. Spilling those words, Aldebaran inclined the wings of the stone on his back, and while maintaining his speed, he slowly descended towards the bottom of the canyon. And by the bank of the great river running through, he somehow managed to make a smooth landing. That was a lie. That's actually funny as fuck. No, that was that was randomly funny as fuck. Spilling those words, Aldebaran inclined the wings of stone on his back, and while maintaining his speed, he slowly descended towards the bottom of the canyon. And by the bank of the great river running through, he somehow managed to make a smooth landing. That was a lie. He had crashed and burned 6 times. That's fucking hilarious. He had crashed and burned 6 times while... That's so fucking funny. Oh my god. What? Oh my god. That was funny as fuck. He had crashed and burned 6 times while carrying Amelia. God damn it. On the 7th attempt, he finally succeeded. No, that's actually funny as fuck. I don't know if Tape wrote that for that to be funny. That shit was fucking hilarious. It'd be a laughing matter if I became unable to get back to my feet here. Sheesh. One time, he had been incapacitated not only in his legs, but from the waist down, which brought him dangerously close to total paralysis and made him incapable of gulping down his poison. He had managed to roll himself into the river to drown to death, but he did not wish to repeat the same failure. God damn it. That is actually fucking hilarious. Oh my god. He's dude, what the fuck? That's funny. Oh my god. That's funny as fuck. That's funny as fuck. I'm sorry. Like that's absolutely fucking hilarious. That dude, that caught me off guard. Okay, all right. In any case, I'm sorry, Amelia, little miss. To ensure she would not drown if the water in the great river rose for some reason, Aldebaran laid Amelia down not on the ground, but in a cavity of the cliff face that was a bit higher up. And in his final comment before leaving her there, he slightly hesitated on how to call her. Hesitating, he ultimately settled on referring to her as he usually did, as Aldebaran. No. Now that their relationship had lost its rightful form, he did not have the courage to address her in any way that pertained to the true relationship between the two. Right after cursing his cowardly self, Aldebaran was struck by a dazzling headache, clenching his teeth. Having overcome a difficult situation, the moment he let his mind relax, the depths he had accumulated began threatening to erupt. Doing his best to hold that back, he gave himself 10 seconds to take deep breaths before gulping down his poison. Repeating that over and over, he stabilized his mind. Albeit, even if he could give his heart a breather through this method, it was unable to grant a rest to his body, and in particular, to his brain. In real time, he had already kept his brain constantly running for nearly 100 hours. Along their journey, Aldebaran had used its healing magic on him to conceal that reality from his mind, but until his body and mind completely shut down, this overheating would likely not subside. Be that as it may, he persuaded himself to just hold out for a little bit longer. There's nobody who can defeat you, you whom I created. That's right, teacher. Nobody can defeat me. That's right. That's precisely right. When he closed his eyes, those words were resurrected within Aldebaran's mind. Using that as support, Aldebaran would... Look at that. It is mine. Mine. Fragmented and indistinct, a voice sounded within him. To whom it had belonged when those words had been spoken, and just how deeply they would scorch his soul. Since he knew the answers to all of those questions, Aldebaran closed off the ears of his heart. He would not halt his tracks, so he had decided. His mind was made up. After all, he could not afford to halt his tracks, so he had decided. And so, the moment was just after Aldebaran, having closed his heart's ears, had at last managed to climb out of the canyon, resuming his hurried march towards the grand... Hold on, chat. The moment was just after Aldebaran, having closed his heart's eyes, had at last climbed. Had at last managed to climb out of the canyon, resuming his hurried march towards the Grand Mogulade Geyser. And thus, what had escaped from Aldebaran's lips was a husky exhale. It was only natural that he had let such a voice spill. After all, it was an accident.
I have spent hundreds of hours replaying every single main series Pokemon game, and now that we've...
I'm so sorry about that, chat. I guess like the last video went into like another one for Pokemon. I digress. Where am I? After all, it was an accident that had flown in from the outside of his consciousness. Wait. in from outside his consciousness, an unforeseen event he had dismissed as impossible in the back of his mind. In Aldebaran's path, around 2 meters ahead of him, a behemoth of an icicle had been pierced. Swallowing his saliva, Aldebaran looked back down at the enemy, looked down at the bottom of the canyon. He understood that Amelia, the one who left down there, had been the one to plunge this extremity of ice here. But the damage she had taken was severe. It would still be a few hours before Amelia regained consciousness. So in other words, this was a Hail Mary she had delivered whilst unconscious. That's some outrageous persistence. Regardless, considering that, if Aldebaran had climbed up only 5 seconds faster, he would have been crushed under the ice pillar just now. It could be said that he had evaded tragedy in 2 senses. Damn it, wait, if Aldebaran had climbed up only 5 seconds faster, he would have been crushed under this ice pillar just now. Wait, let me go back. What the fuck? Wait, like what? And thus, he had escaped, and thus, what had escaped from Aldebaran's lips was a husky exhale. It was only natural that he had let a voice spill. After all, it was an accident that had blown in from outside his consciousness. An unforeseen event he had dismissed as impossible in the back of his mind. In Aldebaran's path, around 2 meters ahead of him, a behemoth of an icicle had been pierced. Shit. Damn it. That actually gives like a lot more credence to the fact that Amelia was able to harm Reinhardt in the if story, because she can like unconsciously make Amelia. Okay. I had a very fucking awesome, very dope, very loyal, very consistent, not glazing too much, commenter on the ReZero videos, Garu-san 2130. They made a comment. I don't know if this is like a guy or girl, whatever you identify as. They made a comment about how like Amelia is like a little bit overtuned basically, and although I don't disagree, I'm just like, if she has as strong of ties to Satella. Wait, you know what? No one ever mentioned that Satella can use like ice magic though. I was just gonna say that like there's a chance that like if she is supposed to be this like familiar of Satella, I wouldn't put it past her to have like all of these like potential uses for her abilities that were just like untapped and never explored. But at the same time, shit like this, like she's unconsciously making magic. Like, okay, all right, you got me. I don't even want to say it's an like there aren't really ass pulls in ReZero. I'm not gonna lie. Like, I mean, like if you guys feel like there's an ass pull moment, let me know. But I feel like it's less ass pully shit, more than undescribed, unexplained. Hey, I can do this now. But to me, it's like it's within the capabilities of certain characters. And by the way, I know that like a lot of people may have saw that in my last reading, or not the last reading, in like the chapter 49, when I was talking about how fucking Garth didn't get affected by Corleones. I was under like my brain, like this is how fast my fucking shit was moving. I was thinking that people like the comment meant that Subaru used Corleones when they went back to the Pleiades watchtower before the fight. That's what I like. That's what my brain was thinking about, not about the Meliota or like not Meliota, Missourian fight. That's not what I was thinking about. For context, that's not what I was thinking about. Quite literally, my brain was like only thinking about the fight between Garf and Al, and my brain was like, wait, Subaru couldn't have used Corleones during that fight because, like that's why I was explaining it like that. Like, and if you go back, you'll see like the way that I phrase it. I'm thinking about Garf versus Al and how Subaru couldn't have used Corleones. I wasn't thinking about the Missouri fight. Oh my goodness, man. Sheesh. Dude, this shit is so fucking good. All right, let me keep going. My bad. I forgot where I was. Okay. Regardless, considering that if Aldebaran had climbed up only 5 seconds faster, he would have been crushed under this ice pillar just now. It could be said that he had evaded tragedy in 2 senses. Of course, even if he suffered a direct hit, Aldebaran would redo it with his authority and draw out the result of not getting hit. But for Amelia's sake, and for Aldebaran's peace of mind, it would be best if she did not have the chance to intervene from here on out. Even so, in battles, it's something that'll crop up every so often, but it's damn frightening. Even in the sparkers of the Gladiator Island, in the midst of life or death battles. See, like, this is the shit that's more interesting for, like, to me. I mean, Tape's doing it so fucking like well. Like, dude, I am not, dude. The name chapter Aldebaran has not been a fucking flop. It has not been a disappointment. Holy fucking shit. And I do know about the spoiler of what his supposed name is, but that's all I know. I swear to God, that's all I know. In the midst of life or death battles, there were times when an opponent had sustained a fatal wound, would muster all their life force left within them, unleashing an attack that aimed to bring him down with him. Among Aldebaran's experiences, there was even someone who had tried to kill him after their head sliced off. Actions with the resolve to accomplish what they set out to do, such that even if one's consciousness or life were lost, the vestiges of their feelings left behind in their limbs would attempt to carry out their will. Amelia's Hail Mary just now was the form taken by her feelings of wishing to stop Aldebaran no matter what. And so, wait. As he attempted to praise her force of will, Aldebaran held his breath. Before his eyes, the ice pillar had barely missed Aldebaran to thrust itself into the ground. That was a colossal spear of ice, one that seemed like it might be wielded by a giant from legend. For that to have been fired with the objective of killing Aldebaran was far too much of an exaggeration, no matter how one might see it. Something this massive, it was just as if an anchor. Indeed, it happened right after he let that mutter slip. With the ice spear Amelia had fired as a landmark, new assassins were dispatched to Aldebaran as he attempted to push on toward the Grand Mogulate geyser. That was, yo, helmet bastard. Looks like you got roughed up pretty badly while I was looking. I wasn't looking. I couldn't say the same for you. And it also seems like you've wound up with quite the foul mouth, haven't you? Filore-chan. Having each surmounted their preliminary battlefields, they were fellows who had risen to the next stage. The combined forces headed by Filore Lagunica, no, by Felt, just like when they had hit him with a flash grenade of memories, they now stood in his way once more. This shit is absolutely peak! It's peak! This is peak! This is peak! No! I wanted this chapter to be longer! Fuck! Oh my god! Oh my god! I'm gonna look at some comments. I'm sorry. Okay. AP name is so peak. Also, did Aldebaran not know Betelgeuse existed? I mean, that's also curious. That's curious. Clearly, he was an important member of the witch cult who had ties to Echidna. I mean, the witch cult would not have existed back then, so like he may not have been the same person. Plus, you know what? Like, no. Before I read this one, remember that Beetlejuice has had different bodies over the course of his like 400 plus years of living. I don't think it's mentioned anywhere. The connections to Echidna. Co-fund. I mean, in Ryu's flashbacks, it's mentioned that Echidna invited him to, which, okay. Oh, well, yeah, okay, like, yeah, she definitely has to, like, have known, like, Beetlejuice, like, I forgot about that, like, created by, like, I believe Al was created by real Echidna and trained by Dream Valley Echidna, something similar to, like, Dark City. I don't know what that means. Literally is mentioned, though, season 2 Petite Short brought it up. Hell, even the novel isn't seen. Okay. I like how there's, like, no fucking crazy comments. Like, no rage bait, no toxicity. Not that, like, I'm gonna let that shit get to me, like last time. Like people are just so locked in. People are so locked in about the shit. Okay. Damn it. And we're going into chapter. Oh my god, bro. All right. This has been your boy Zero, aka Black Natsuki Subaru. You guys already know this shit is absolutely fucking peak. This is so good, bro. Like, bro, this shit is literally on the same level as Arc 4. And I'll say, like, Arc 4, top 5 greatest arcs in fiction, period. Top 5. All right, okay, because I know y'all looking at me, I'm looking at y'all, and you're like, yeah, you gonna read the first fucking page. ReZero, Arc 9, Chapter 54, Warlock versus Witch. I'm stopping right at the end right here. Just like you, I am a complete failure of a girl. Aldebaran would never forget the somber expression upon the witch's visage as she spoke those words. And so he had thought, did even the witch, with a face that seemed to know just about anything and everything concerning this world's providence, with demeanor that seemed to disseminate the roots of knowledge through every nook and cranny of this world, who conducted herself with an air of understanding every aspect of the universe, did she too have moments in which she grieved her own powerlessness? Of course I do. If you would like an example, then your very existence, the very fact that you are currently like this, is proof that I was lacking after all. Hearing that, Aldebaran's feelings were complicated. Within Aldebaran, this witch was a great existence, and though he was loath to admit it, she was even more tremendous. She was even a tremendous one. although there were few to whom he could compare her. She was someone who always felt greater than any comparison. For that witch to consider herself a complete failure was of no joy to him whatsoever. Only, if the witch had been bereft of such self-acknowledgement, her current relationship with Aldebaran would not exist. If the witch had been in any position to not deem herself a complete failure, then you and I would simply remain in our rightful places. You are free to daydream about a future that did not unfold in such a manner, but unfortunately, you ended up being dealt the worst fate of all. Though, I am sorry to say, it was rather fortuitous of myself. For myself. This has been your boy Zero, aka Black Natsuki Subaru. Like, I want to talk about this shit even more. Before I like fully read the next chapter, I want y'all to let me know, like, on this video, do y'all just want to have a discussion? There is so much that I want to talk about, and it may not be like put to the forefront. This is one of the best named chapters in the entirety of ReZero. I'm not glazing only because like I fucking love Al. This shit actually just went so fucking stupid. Dude, and like, okay, I was expecting like a little bit more, only in the sense that I wanted this shit to be fatter. The shit that they gave, immaculate, crazy. I was fucking shook. I just like it was so good. I thought that it went too fast. That's just me. That's just me. Like this shit was crazy good. This shit was crazy good. I was just thinking like, dude, like I thought I was just gonna get like the entire story, just you know, like fucking nobody clip that. Don't fucking clip that, you fucking freaks. Oh my god, dude. Let me know in the comments, bro. Like, damn it. Aldebaran was fucking peak.